we begin at the beginning. We are going to start with the very first part of Chapter 1. We're going to start with 4 terms that you're going to get to know very well as the 2-semester sequence of anatomy and physiology continues. So we start off with the term anatomy. Anatomy is the structure of body parts and their relationships. And there are 2 terms that are important to anatomy: gross anatomy, which is the study of large structures; microscopic anatomy, which is the study of structures too small to be seen with the naked eye. For each of these, I would like you to think of one example at least of each and kind of write it in there, and we'll talk about them in class. Our 4th term then, our first 3 terms are anatomy, gross anatomy, and microscopic anatomy. Our 4th term is physiology. And this is different, and I want you to differentiate it in your mind. Physiology is the function of the body and its parts. Again, I want you to think of an example. This one's a little bit harder. Try to think of an example of physiology occurring inside of our bodies. So the key word with anatomy is structure. The key word with physiology is function. I want you to keep that in mind and separate them out. And as the semester goes on, you'll find that we cover different systems of the body. Generally speaking, we go in just that order. We start off with the gross anatomy of a system. We move on to the microscopic anatomy. And then we talk about how that microscopic anatomy goes into action, and that is the physiology of the system. So next, we're going to move on to the organization of the body, and there are 8 levels of organization. And this is basically a hierarchy of systems that fit into other systems. So here's the picture. We are an organism. We are an organism, and there are, and as an organism, there are 11 or 12 or 13 different organ systems that comprise who we are. So these organ systems, it kind of just depends on how you define organ system and how you count them. So that's why the different numbers there. But these organ systems make us who we are and allow us to function as human beings and as organisms. But let's start off with the very basic level of the very first level of everything and how things fit together. And at each of these levels, I want you to just expand the lesson a little bit. Think about an example of each, and as you're writing down the thing and its definition, I want you to write down an example too, just to keep your mind fluid, and that you're not just writing down the words that I say, but that you're actually, expanding upon your own thought processes as well. Kind of get into the habit of writing down a few thoughts as you go along for each thing. So, the organization of the body. We start off with the atom. The atom is the building block of matter. Atoms fit together into molecules. Molecules are entities consisting of atoms in certain spatial relationship to one another. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to place in here one more thing, which is a macromolecule. So it's actually a molecule, but it's just a little bit more complex than that. It's a protein. Proteins are just too important not to include in this hierarchy. Proteins can be defined many different ways. Generally speaking, in general biology, you probably define proteins as the end products of DNA. DNA is transcribed into RNA. RNA is translated into proteins, basically. But in anatomy and physiology, we're going to define proteins slightly differently. And we're going to say that proteins are the structures through which all physiology takes place. The structures through which all physiology takes place. And as you're looking at examples of proteins, it may be a little tricky for you. You may not know any proteins off the top of your head, or do you? So as a hint here, any word that ends in an ASE is an enzyme and is a protein. Also, any word that ends in IN is a protein. In this class, I've never come across a word that ends in IN that was not a protein. So just keep that in mind as we go along, and maybe that'll jog your memory and see if you can come up with some proteins as examples. Okay, moving on. Here is our organelle. This is an example of an organelle here. Organelle is strictly defined, translated as tiny organ, it is the structure inside of a cell that allows the cell to have a particular character. Next on our list is a cell. Cells are units that can do all the functions of a living thing. They are amazing. This is the basic level at which life begins. If you take a cell and put it in a petri dish in the right conditions, pH, temperature, nutrients, that cell will grow and thrive and live. All right. A cell by itself, as far as humans go, doesn't mean much, but if you put a cell together with many cells like it, it now has a particular function. This is called a tissue. A tissue is a collection of cells that serve a particular function, or that serve a common function. Now, our tissues then will come together to make an organ. An organ is two or more tissues that work toward a common goal. So, then we move into the organ system level, and I'll take you through each of the organ systems in a moment. And then the organ systems fit in to make an organism.